My name is Mia Callahan. I am 33 years old. I work as a nurse in the emergency department of a hospital in Seattle. People often imagine nurses as gentle souls with calm voices and steady hands. That part is true, but the reality is harsher. My world is filled with alarms that scream at all hours, families that cry in hallways, and patients who cling to life by a thread. Every day I face blood, fear, and the possibility of loss. For more than a decade, this has been my life. 12-hour shifts, sleepless nights, coffee instead of meals. I watched friends chase adventures, buy homes, get married, while I stayed behind the curtain of the ER. I did not live extravagantly. I did not live loudly. I lived carefully. I saved. Dollar by dollar, year after year. I built a quiet mountain of sacrifice. I said no to vacations, no to luxuries, no to the kind of life people my age bragged about online. My bank account became my one secret pride because I wasn't saving for myself. I was saving for them, for my mother, Veronica, for my stepfather, Raymond. I believed that if I gave them something permanent, something stable, maybe I could finally stitch this family together. We had always been fragile, always leaning toward fractures, but I thought a house could change that. $175,000. That was the number. That was my gift. I can still remember the day I handed the down payment to the realtor. My fingers trembled as I signed my name. It felt surreal, as if all the long nights in the hospital, all the skipped meals, all the loneliness I endured, finally meant something. The house was mine on paper, but in my heart, I thought of it as theirs. When we stood in front of it for the first time, the sun had dipped low, throwing gold across the white siding. I held the keys tight enough to leave marks in my skin. For a moment, I let myself smile. I told myself, "This is it, Mia. This is the moment you give back. This is the moment you prove your worth." I will never forget the way my mother's voice softened. She touched the doorframe as if it were a relic and whispered, "Oh, Mia, it's beautiful. You've given us a dream." And Raymond, always steady, always serious, placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're an angel, Mia. We'll never forget this." Their words landed deep in me. I wanted them to be true. I wanted to believe, just for once, that I wasn't invisible in my own family, that maybe, by giving them a home, I would finally belong inside it. But even in that moment, I noticed things. The way my stepbrother Damian lingered near the porch, his eyes gleaming as he looked at the structure. The way my mother's expression brightened when she spoke about his future. The way Raymond kept praising him, as if the house itself was somehow meant for him. Damian, always Damian. The favored one, the chosen one. I pushed the thought away. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself this wasn't about favoritism. This was about family, about love. I swallowed the unease. I buried it because I wanted so desperately to believe that this time would be different. I turned the key in the lock, opened the door, and led them inside. Every room felt alive with possibility. The living room echoed with our footsteps. The kitchen smelled faintly of fresh paint. The upstairs windows opened to a quiet street lined with trees. I could almost see the life I imagined: family dinners, holiday gatherings, laughter that filled the walls. For one fleeting second, I believed that I had done it, that my sacrifice mattered, that my place in this family was finally secure. I whispered to myself, "This is for them. This will keep us together." The sky outside glowed soft and golden. A gentle breeze carried the scent of spring. My chest swelled with hope. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that this house was not a gift. It was a trap. The first step into the foyer was the first step into betrayal. The walls that I thought would hold us together would soon be the very walls that exposed the truth. I thought I had bought love. I thought I had secured loyalty. But I was wrong, because what I really bought was the stage for my family's deception, and when the curtain lifted, it would cost me everything. Buying the house was supposed to be simple. At least, that is what I kept telling myself. I remember the day I signed the papers. The house officially became mine. Every signature on those contracts, every notarized line, it felt like I was planting a seed for the family I hoped we could be. I could not ignore the shiver of pride that ran through me. This was my first real investment, my first major step toward building a safe place, a home. Veronica was there with me. She squeezed my hand tightly. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. "Mia, thank you," she said. "This is the house for all of us, for the family." I nodded and smiled. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel that warmth, the reassurance that I was doing the right thing. Raymond, always more reserved, patted my shoulder. It was meant to comfort, but it felt slightly distant. "You've done something incredible, Mia," he said. "Something that matters." I kept repeating to myself, "This is it. This is what family looks like." The house was not just bricks and wood. It was the future. Even at the first dinner in that house, I tried to feel the warmth of it, the promise that everything would be all right. The table was set simply. Nothing extravagant, but filled with effort. I watched Veronica bustling around the kitchen. She smiled at me every now and then, as if to say, "See, this is our home now." And then Damian arrived. He had a confident stride, the kind of ease that made it seem like he had always belonged here, even though the house was technically mine. He sat at the head of the table, a grin that could charm anyone plastered on his face. Veronica kept glancing at him. Every few moments, she would say, "Your mother wants you to have a place to settle your career, a place to build your future, Damian." I felt a tiny flicker of irritation, a small ember that I tried to smother immediately, because I had told myself 100 times, I am doing this for the family. I am providing. I am helping. I am generous. I forced a smile. "Yes, it's good for him," I said quietly, almost to myself. Then I took a breath, reminded myself, the house is still mine. Everything is fine. Nothing is wrong. But in that moment, I could not ignore a strange tightening in my chest, a subtle warning, almost imperceptible, whispering, "Watch closely. Watch everyone." I had spent months choosing the right house, scoured listings, called every agent I could find, toured properties on rainy mornings and scorching afternoons. I had calculated every detail, the neighborhood, the commute, the school district, the garden space, every number, every square foot, every corner. This house was mine, officially mine. And yet, there was something in the way Veronica kept looking at Damian, her words laced with pride that did not belong to me, made the air feel heavier than it should. I tried to ignore it. I focused on setting the table, placing the silverware just so, smiled at Raymond when he made a polite comment about the garden, laughed at Damian's jokes, even though some felt sharp, almost designed to remind me, this house might not feel completely like mine after all. I told myself I was imagining it, imagining the favoritism, imagining the subtle shift in energy that made me feel like an outsider in my own gift, because the truth I kept close to my chest. like fragile glass I did not dare drop, was that I had done everything right, followed the rules, honored every agreement, respected every promise. And yet, even as I poured the wine, passed the plates, I could feel the small, insistent voice whispering, "Not everyone here feels the same way you do, Mia. Be careful." I swallowed my discomfort, forced another smile. "I am happy this works for everyone," I said. My voice sounded firm, confident, but inside, a part of me trembled, sensing that the road ahead might be far more complicated than I had ever imagined. I did not know it yet, but that night, that first family dinner in the house, was when the first threads of betrayal began to weave themselves quietly around me. Every laugh, every cheer, every clink of a fork against a plate. It felt normal, safe, perfect. And yet, just beneath it all, I could feel the tension, subtle and unspoken, growing like shadows along the walls. I told myself I was overthinking, that my doubts were nothing more than fear, because I wanted to believe in them, because I wanted to believe in family, because I had no idea how much I would come to regret trusting so blindly. The day of the housewarming party arrived, and I felt a mixture of pride and nervous excitement. I had imagined this moment for weeks. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, all coming together to celebrate something I had worked so hard to give my family. The air outside was alive with chatter. Laughter drifted from the street. The smell of freshly cut flowers and the faint scent of baked goods filled the air. I could hear little feet running across the front yard, children chasing each other with squeals of delight, and the sun shone softly, casting a warm glow over the freshly painted porch. I opened the front door, smiling as everyone stepped inside. This is it, I thought. This is what I wanted. A place where we can all be together, happy. I led them through the rooms, showing off the living room I had chosen, the kitchen I had spent hours planning, the garden that I had dreamed about for so long. "Oh, Mia, it is perfect," one of my friends said. "You have such good taste." I smiled, nodding, my chest swelling with pride. Yes, I had done something good, something lasting. I wanted my mother to see it, to feel it, to finally appreciate everything I had done for her. Veronica looked around with her eyes wide, a small smile on her face. Raymond followed closely behind, polite and measured, nodding at each detail. And then Damian appeared, walking into the living room with that same confident ease, like he belonged here, like he had been waiting for this moment all along. I ignored the tiny pang in my chest. I tried to focus on the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the warmth around me. We gathered in the dining room for a toast. I raised my glass, feeling my heart beat fast. "To family," I said. "To this home," I added, my voice steady. "To new beginnings," I whispered, almost to myself. Everyone cheered, glasses clinked. I smiled, and for a moment, I believed in what I had created. But then, the air shifted. Raymond's lawyer, Clifford Harlow, stepped forward. The room quieted instantly. All eyes turned toward him. He held a thick envelope, and I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the serious look on his face. "This is a matter of legal record," he began, his voice calm but firm. He opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. "I am here to present the official documents regarding the ownership of this property." My stomach sank, a cold, heavy weight pressing against my chest. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "The house has been transferred to Damian Mercer," he said plainly. Every word hit me like a hammer. each syllable louder than the last. I froze, unable to breathe properly, unable to believe what I was hearing, unable to understand how the house I had bought, the house that was mine, could suddenly belong to Damian. Veronica rushed to Damian, hugging him tightly. Her voice, soft and unwavering, whispered, "Mia, I just wanted to secure a future for my son. You understand, don't you?" I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell her that this was not just unfair, it was a betrayal. But my mouth refused to move. My smile, the one I had been wearing all day, vanished. I looked around the room. Friends' faces were confused, questioning, shocked. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Raymond looked uneasy, but said nothing. I could feel my hands tremble. The toast I had planned, the words of celebration, died in my throat. I wanted to step forward, grab the papers, demand answers. But instead, I stood there silently, watching the life I had worked so hard to create slip through my fingers. I remember my own voice in my mind, repeating a question over and over. How could they do this? How could they betray me like this? I tried to focus, to ground myself, but it was impossible. Everything I had believed, everything I had sacrificed, felt like a lie. Damian smiled at me, unaware, or perhaps pretending not to know. The storm behind my eyes. I forced myself to breathe, to stay composed, but the truth could not be hidden. I felt hollow, stunned, betrayed, and in that moment, I realized this was no longer about a house. It was about trust and how deeply it could be broken. The room seemed to shrink around me. Laughter now sounded cruel. Every congratulatory word felt like a blade. I wanted to run, leave, vanish, but I stood there, frozen, watching my world unravel, one legal document at a time. That night, I went to bed, alone, with the echo of voices and the bitter taste of betrayal, lingering long after the party had ended, because in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The house was quiet now, or at least it should have been. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands clutching a pillow so tightly my knuckles turned white. The laughter from the party still echoed in my ears. The voices of my mother and Damian carried through the walls. A soft, infuriating reminder that they were celebrating. A celebration of something stolen from me. I could feel my chest tighten, a crushing weight pressing down. Every breath tasted like betrayal. Every heartbeat screamed that everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, had been taken from me without a single apology. I replayed the day in my mind, over and over. The smiles, the congratulations, the polite clinks of glasses, Veronica's proud, gleaming eyes, Raymond's measured nods, Damian's charming, self-satisfied grin. All of it a mask. I whispered to myself, in their eyes, I am nothing. I am just a wallet that walks, a convenient provider, disposable. I let out a bitter laugh, not loud, just in my mind. Because if I made a sound, they might hear it and laugh too. I let the anger burn inside me, sharp and bright, like fire against ice, filling every corner of my chest with its heat. I remembered the papers, the documents Clifford had read aloud, the official, unyielding words, transferring my house to Damian, every syllable a hammer striking my chest, every phrase a reminder that nothing, not even my hard work, mattered to them. I sank deeper into the pillow, fingers tangled in the fabric, trembling, shaking, but beneath the fear and hurt, a spark flickered. I will not vanish. I will not allow them to erase me, to treat me like I was nothing. I will not disappear quietly into their carefully constructed lies. I sat there, listening to their laughter float from the living room. At first, it felt like salt on an open wound. Every joke, every cheer, every toast seared my mind. And then, slowly, I felt that fire sharpen into something else, into purpose. I pictured Veronica's smug face, arms wrapped around Damian, her eyes filled with pride and satisfaction, like he had earned something I had built with my own hands. I pictured Damian smiling, oblivious, undeserving. I pictured Raymond, silent and complicit, thinking he had done the smart thing. And I made a decision sharp, clear, unyielding, cutting through the fog of disbelief and hurt. I would take action, not tomorrow, not next week. Now, I would fight. I would make them pay, not with violence, no, but with every tool I had, every advantage the law could give me, every strategy designed to reclaim what was mine, and to make sure they never underestimated me again. I reached for my phone, fingers hovering, shaking slightly. Then I dialed a number I had not called in years. "Clifford Harlow?" I whispered. His voice answered, calm, professional, familiar. "I need your help," I said. "I need justice. I need someone to make this right." There was a pause, then certainty. "You have my full attention," he said. "I'll guide you through this, step by step. We will reclaim what is yours." I hung up and leaned back against the wall, the anger no longer aimless, no longer raw. It had a shape, a direction. It had a target. I had a plan forming, slowly, meticulously. I thought about the hearings, the legal papers, the confrontation. Every step calculated, precise, relentless. I imagined Veronica, shocked, humiliated, forced to acknowledge the consequences of her betrayal. I imagined Damian, powerless, unable to charm his way out. I imagined Raymond, finally understanding that every action has a price. This was no longer about a house. It was about respect. It was about dignity. It was about proving to them, to the world, and most importantly, to myself, that I would not be controlled. I would not be erased. I remembered every sleepless night I had endured, every overtime shift, every dollar saved, every tiny sacrifice I had made. And I realized that all of it had been leading to this moment. I had been forging strength in the quiet. And now that strength was ready to be unleashed. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and let the fire settle in my chest. The fire of anger. Yes. But also the fire of clarity, focus, and purpose. I would rise, I would fight, and I would win, because in their eyes, I might have been nothing. But in my own eyes, I was just getting started. I stayed awake long into the night, listening to the sounds of their celebration, and with every laugh, every clink of a glass, every cheer, the storm inside me grew, not uncontrolled, not chaotic, but precise, deliberate, patient, waiting for the moment to strike. And when it did, they would remember my name, They would remember that Mia Callahan, the quiet, patient, overlooked daughter and stepdaughter, had survived and had become something they could never have imagined. The morning I contacted Clifford, the storm I had been nurturing in my chest suddenly had a plan, a direction, a target. He arrived at my small apartment that afternoon, carrying a briefcase that seemed almost too heavy, and a calm authority that made the air feel sharper, more serious. "Let me see everything," Clifford said. His eyes scanned the documents I handed him. Contracts, receipts, notarized papers, everything I had meticulously kept. He read each line carefully, slowly, deliberately, then leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. His eyes met mine, steady and unwavering. "Mia, this is fraud," he said, plain and simple. "They have no legal right to transfer your property to Damian. This is a deliberate act of deception, and you have every ground to challenge it in court." I felt a flicker of hope, sharp, sudden, like a light cutting through the heavy fog that had settled over me for days. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling, but my mind already racing ahead. "We file a lawsuit immediately," Clifford said. "We go to the district court, demand a reversal of the transfer, and pursue damages for the fraud they committed. I need you to trust me, Mia. This is going to be a fight, but it's one we can win." The very next day, the papers were filed. Every form, every petition, every statement, prepared meticulously. The courthouse doors loomed large as if they were the gate to a battlefield. I felt the weight of my own life pressing against my chest. Soon after, Veronica and Raymond were served. I watched them through the thin veil of tension that now surrounded every interaction. The confident smiles I had once known were gone, replaced with wary glances and small, nervous gestures. They were called in for questioning, official, legal, unavoidable. The threat of criminal prosecution now hovered over them like a dark cloud, and I could see it. The fear in their eyes, the calculation behind every word they spoke. Damian tried to act innocent, feigning ignorance, playing the part of the unsuspecting son. But the evidence was damning. Every transaction, every recorded agreement, every witness testimony, it all pointed clearly to a calculated attempt to steal from me. I remember sitting in my apartment, watching the news of our filings, reading updates on court procedures, feeling the tide of justice slowly building. The tension grew, the calls from Clifford precise and urgent, the legal jargon unfamiliar yet empowering. It all became part of the rhythm of my new life, a life where I was no longer passive, no longer invisible, no longer a victim. I pictured the courtroom, the polished floors, the wooden benches, the sharp scent of paper and ink. I imagined Veronica and Raymond sitting there, unable to hide their guilt, forced to answer for their deception. Damian fidgeting, realizing that charm and arrogance would not save him. The first hearing arrived. I sat in the gallery, hands folded tightly in my lap, my heart pounding with every step of the lawyers, every statement, every objection, every ruling. Clifford spoke with authority, presenting our case with precision. "The property was purchased and paid for entirely by Ms. Callahan," he said. "This transfer constitutes fraud. We demand it be reversed immediately." I felt a rush of vindication, a flicker of triumph. And yet, the room was still tense, still heavy with anticipation. The opposing counsel tried to argue, twisting words, claiming miscommunication, attempting to justify the transfer. But the facts, the proof, the paper trail, it was all too clear. Every document, every receipt, every witness built an undeniable case. I remember looking across the courtroom, Veronica and Raymond, faces pale, strained, the arrogance I had once known, completely dissolved. And Damian, oh, Damian, still trying to smile, still trying to act untouchable, but I could see it. The first cracks in his confident facade, the realization that this time he could not escape. The judge reviewed the documents, asked questions, and I felt the shift in the air. Subtle, but powerful. I realized in that moment that the fight I had feared, that the confrontation I had dreaded, was mine to command. Every choice, every step, I could control. And Clifford, standing beside me, his calm presence gave me courage. He reminded me, "This is more than property, Mia. It's your life, your dignity, your right to be respected. We will see this through." I left the courtroom that day. The weight on my chest lifted slightly. A fire still burned, but now it was tempered with purpose, with strategy, with the certainty that the tables were turning. The weeks that followed were tense. Every call from the lawyer, every reply from the opposing side, every deposition added another layer to the web of accountability I was weaving. I began to see them differently, not as family, not as protectors, but as adversaries who had underestimated me, who had assumed I would stay silent, who had believed that I could be walked over, ignored, discarded. I smiled quietly to myself, let the thought linger. I had learned something powerful in this process. I was stronger than they imagined, cleverer, and far more determined, because this fight was not just about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my right to exist as I chose. Unmanipulated, unignored, unstoppable. And the more the legal battle unfolded, the more I realized the storm I had felt in my chest was no longer just anger. It was a reckoning, and soon they would feel it too. The day they finally agreed to meet, the tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Every step I took into the office felt deliberate, measured. Every breath I drew reminded me that this was my moment, the moment I would take back what was mine. Not with anger, not with violence, but with law, with logic, with precision. Clifford had prepared everything meticulously, documents stacked neatly, each page representing the battle I had endured. Every clause, every signature line, every legal phrase. A blueprint for justice. I entered the room, head high. The familiar, uncomfortable scent of polished wood and legal papers filled the air. And there they were, Veronica, face pale, eyes avoiding mine. Raymond, rigid, stiff, a faint sheen of sweat betraying his unease. Damian, trying to look confident, but shifting on his feet like a boy caught in a trap. Clifford spoke first. Calm, steady, measured. "This is the settlement agreement," he said. "Ms. Callahan will regain full ownership of the property. All legal fees will be covered by the defendants. Additionally, $50,000 in compensation will be paid for emotional damages." Every word landed with weight, a tangible shift in the room, as if the walls themselves were exhaling, releasing the tension that had pressed down on me for months. Veronica's face crumpled. Tears welled up, spilling over. Her voice trembled as she tried to plead. "Mia, please, I never wanted it to come to this. I was only trying to help Damian. I didn't mean to hurt you like this. I met her gaze, steely, unwavering, and spoke with deliberate clarity. You chose your son. From now on, I choose myself. The words cut through the room, cold and sharp, yet utterly controlled. For a fraction of a second, I saw a flash of recognition in her eyes. Shame, guilt, understanding. But I did not hesitate. I did not soften. I did not allow her tears to sway me. Clifford slid the papers across the table. I picked up the pen, hand steady, heart steady, and signed, one by one. Veronica, Raymond, Damian. They signed their names, each signature a concession, each stroke of the pen an acknowledgement that they had underestimated me, that they had violated trust and must face the consequences. I held the documents in my hands, the weight of them real, reassuring, a symbol of reclaimed power, a declaration that I would not be manipulated, erased, or ignored again. Veronica's sobs filled the room. Raymond said nothing. His silence was deafening. Damian avoided my eyes, shifting uncomfortably, the carefully constructed facade of innocence crumbling before me. And I realized the house, the money, the legal victory were only part of it. The real victory was the statement I had made, a statement to them and to myself that I would not be anyone's afterthought, that I would not be defined by their favoritism, their selfishness, their greed. I could feel the power of that realization rising from deep within me, like a fire that had been smoldering for years, finally unleashed, steady, controlled, unstoppable. I looked at Veronica one last time, her tears now mixed with fear, desperation. You lost, Mother, I said quietly. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to let anyone else define my worth. You chose your son. I chose myself. The room fell silent. Even Clifford's steady breathing seemed louder in the tension, but I felt nothing but clarity and strength. The ownership papers were returned to me. The legal fees were covered, the additional compensation promised, and with them, I reclaimed something far more important than a house. I reclaimed my dignity, my voice, my right to exist on my own terms, to make my own choices, to never be a pawn again. I folded the documents carefully, placed them in my bag, and for the first time in months, I felt a quiet, overwhelming power. Not the power of revenge, but the power of standing firm, of choosing oneself, of refusing to be erased. Clifford followed me out. You did well, he said. You stayed composed. You stayed focused. Now, the rest is up to you. Enjoy what you've earned. You have every right to feel victorious. I nodded, a small, steady smile tugging at my lips, and I realized this was more than a legal victory. It was a declaration of independence, a personal revolution, a boundary set in stone. For the first time, I understood the true weight of my own choices, the power of refusing to let betrayal define me, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that from this moment on, I would live on my terms, unapologetically, unshakably, and entirely free. Stepping out into the sunlight, I felt the warmth on my skin, felt the air fill my lungs, and I knew, without doubt, I had reclaimed not just a house, but my life. And nothing, no one, could take that from me again. The day I signed the papers to sell the house, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not joy, not yet, but a subtle, creeping lightness, a sensation as if chains I had carried for a decade had finally been lifted, and I could breathe. The house behind me was no longer mine or theirs. It was just a building, walls, and memories. Memories of betrayal, manipulation, and broken trust. I felt a pang of sadness. Yes, I had poured years of my life into that home. Every savings, every sacrifice, every late night, all gone in a transaction that reclaimed my dignity, but it was also liberation. Walking out for the last time, I felt the sunlight on my face, warm, forgiving, almost mocking, reminding me that life was bigger than anger, bigger than revenge, bigger than the people who tried to define my worth. I found a small house in the outskirts of Seattle, not grand, not luxurious, but honest, modest, and with a small garden bathed in sunlight, a quiet street, the smell of rain-soaked earth, and the kind of peace you only feel when no one can touch you. The first time I stepped inside, I let my fingers glide along the windowsills, the door frames, the empty spaces. Every corner seemed to whisper, "This is yours now. You decide. You create." I spent hours wandering from room to room, imagining furniture, colors, decorations, but the garden called me the most. A patch of earth that promised life, and a chance to plant something, not for anyone else, but for me. I knelt in the soil, hands digging, pressing, planting. First marigolds, then daisies, herbs, the dirt clinging to my hands, grounding me. And with every handful of earth, every seed pressed gently into the ground, I felt pieces of myself returning, the pieces that had been hidden, pushed down, ignored, now rising again. And then, as I was planting, I heard a familiar voice, soft, hesitant. "You, Mia?" I looked up, and there he was, Damian Mercer, standing awkwardly at the edge of the garden, hands stuffed in his pockets, shifting nervously, not a trace of the arrogant smirk he once wore so easily. For a moment, my chest tightened, the memories rushed back, the betrayal, the greed, the lies, but I didn't move, didn't react with anger, because I realized I no longer needed to. I just wanted to say, congratulations, Damian said finally, his voice low, almost unsure. I didn't mean for it to get so messy. I stood slowly, brushing the soil from my hands, looking at him, really looking, and I felt nothing but calm, nothing but clarity. "You didn't understand anything before," I said softly. "But that's over now. This garden, this house, it's mine. I choose me." His shoulders slumped, the weight of his own mistakes and entitlement suddenly visible. He nodded quietly. "No, I see that now. I'm sorry, Mia." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. His apology, his presence, were irrelevant to the life I was building now. I turned back to the soil, pressed another seed into the earth, watered it slowly, and felt peace spreading through me, stronger than anger, stronger than revenge. It was freedom. The sun shifted across the sky, casting long, gentle shadows, and for the first time in years, I felt a quiet peace. No one was controlling me, no one dictating my worth, no one deciding what I could have or deserved. It was just me, the soil, the flowers, and the life I was choosing to build. I planted a small marigold in the corner, pressing it firmly into the ground, watering it carefully, and I felt hope stirring in my chest, a patient, quiet hope. the kind that only grows when you decide to trust yourself. I thought of Veronica, Raymond, Damian, of all they had done, all the ways they tried to control me, the lies, the favoritism, the betrayal. But they no longer had power over me, no longer could shape my days, my choices, my heart. I stood up, hands covered in soil, brushed the dirt from my palms, and looked at the garden, small, bright, alive. I realized I was planting more than flowers. I was planting boundaries. I was planting dignity. I was planting freedom. Every seed, every bloom, every scrape of dirt was a testament to survival, to resilience, to the fact that no one can erase you when you decide to stand tall. I watered another row, felt the soil seep between my fingers, and smiled quietly, because this life was mine, entirely mine. I sat on the small bench I had placed in the corner of the garden, hands resting on my knees, feeling the warmth of the sun, feeling the rhythm of the earth, and I whispered, I have chosen myself. I am free, and nothing, no one, can take this from me. I looked around. The house, the garden, the open sky, and for the first time, the past no longer weighed on me. The betrayal no longer haunted me. The anger no longer controlled me. It was just me, alive, whole, and finally, free. The days that followed felt different, not because the world had changed, but because I had. The weight of expectation, of manipulation, of old burdens had finally lifted from my shoulders, and the air itself seemed lighter, sweeter, as if it recognized my freedom. At the hospital, I walked through the halls with a sense of calm authority. Every patient I cared for, every decision I made, was a reflection of my competence, my dedication, a statement that I had earned my place fully and without compromise. I no longer needed anyone's approval or anyone's pity. I had survived, and I was thriving. Being promoted to head nurse brought more than a title. It brought responsibility. Yes, but also pride. Not pride rooted in vanity or recognition from others, but the quiet, steady satisfaction that comes from knowing you did everything the right way. I had faced challenges. I had faced mistakes, and I had come out stronger, wiser, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. Evenings were no longer filled with anxiety or unrest. I cooked simple meals for myself, read books I had longed to finish, watched the sunset from the window of my small home, and let myself rest, truly rest, without guilt, without obligations that did not belong to me, without the shadow of anyone else's expectations. And then there was Daniel Harrington, a colleague, quiet, steady, focused, but with a warmth that drew me in, not someone flashy, not someone trying to impress, but someone whose presence made the day feel lighter, whose small gestures carried meaning. We began talking during lunch breaks, sharing patient stories, laughing over small mishaps, sometimes just exchanging observations about medical procedures, little moments, insignificant on the surface, but each one planting a seed of connection. I noticed the way he listened, really listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, but truly absorbing my words. I found myself wanting to linger longer in conversation, wanting to share more, and feeling a flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. After one long shift, he found me by the nurse's station. "Coffee?" he asked, holding 2 cups. A simple gesture, yet it carried weight I could not ignore. I smiled, accepting it, feeling warmth spread through me. And in that moment, I realized that life could surprise me again, that trust, even in small doses, could feel thrilling. At home, the quiet routine became a comfort. I arranged the small spaces of my house. Every object, every corner, every little detail was chosen by me, not imposed by anyone else. The order, the peace, the intentionality were reminders of my independence, my power to create the life I wanted. I spent my mornings planning shifts, mentoring younger nurses. Seeing the growth and gratitude in their eyes reminded me of why I had fought so hard to stand tall. And in my free moments, I explored new hobbies, revisited old dreams, discovering that life had so much room for exploration when I was no longer tethered to manipulation. Evenings often found me with Daniel, sitting quietly in the staff lounge, or walking through the quiet streets near the hospital, sharing stories about our days, exchanging laughter and subtle smiles, a gentle connection growing with patience and care, a hint that life held new possibilities, beyond work, beyond struggle, beyond what I had imagined. I thought a lot about my own growth, the woman I had been, the woman I had become, and the life I was building. It was not perfect. It was not glamorous, but it was authentic. A life where my choices mattered, where my happiness was my own responsibility, and where I could finally enjoy the fruits of my perseverance. I whispered to myself one evening, leaning against the window. Su fan boy dala kwaku, nyung tu homne, do chan hen fuk, do chan bantun, vatoy mo lom de don dio tot dat mui. The city lights flickered softly below, a gentle reminder that life moved on, and that I was not merely surviving, I was living, fully, boldly, and freely. Daniel's laughter echoed lightly in my memory, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, the next chapter would include someone walking beside me, someone who shared my work, my passions, my quiet moments of reflection, and who respected the strength it had taken for me to arrive here. I closed my eyes and let a smile settle on my face, a soft, contented smile, not triumphant or boastful, but peaceful, aware, and hopeful. I did not know exactly what the future held. The challenges, the joys, the moments of connection and discovery, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This life, my life, was mine to shape, to nurture, to grow, and I was ready for everything it had to offer.